It's true. John chapter 6, we've been looking at the 7 signs in John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke call them miracles, but John calls them signs because they are pointing to Jesus as being God's Son, the Messiah. A sign always points beyond itself to something else. And these, what we call miracles, are signs. We kind of took a break last Lord's Day when we looked in 2 Kings and saw a passage of Scripture that is very similar to this, when Elisha fed 100 people at one time with just a few loaves of bread. Here we have Jesus feeding 5,000 people with loaves of bread, 5 in number, and little fishes, probably about like sardines would be, 2 of them. Now this is a lengthy passage. I need to read it all, but I'm only going to really focus in my thinking on the 12th verse. Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw signs that he was doing on the sick. Well, Jesus went up upon a mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand, and lifting up his eyes, seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we going to buy bread so that these people may eat?" Now he said this to test Philip, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Well, Philip answered him, 200 denarii, 8 months' wages. 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get just a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "Look, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But why are they among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the 5,000, have the people sit down." You know, that takes a little time, doesn't it? We're doing good to get this 25, 30 to sit down early here, but to get 5,000 people to sit down, get organized. Have the people sit down. Now, there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves. He gave thanks, and he distributed to those who were seated. Matthew, Mark, and Luke in this same story says he gave it to his disciples, and they gave it to the people. Gave also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their full, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." Now, if you go to the rest restaurant with June and I, Outback, right? Yeah, Outback. You go to the restaurant with June and I, there's always two things that have to take place at the end. The first thing is what?
Prayer.
No, the first thing at the end of the meal is what? That June has to do. Pay the check. You got to pay that. What is this whispering over here? Sometimes David takes us out, and once in a while he pays the check. But that's the last thing you got to do is pay the check. But there's one more thing that you always have to do when June's there.
Take the leftovers.
There you go, the leftovers. Forget the tip. No, the leftovers. You got to pay the bill, and you've got to have your little doggy bag. In our case, 2 doggy bags and 3 cat bags. 2 events: pay the check and a take-home box. So Jesus feeds the 5,000. But there's a problem. If you look in Matthew 14:21, you will find that there's more than 5,000, because Matthew 14:21 says, besides the women and children. So we got more than 5,000 there. And there's great adversity, great trouble, hungry people. The people have been following Jesus, and they're sitting there listening to him teaching. I have not met many Baptists yet that will skip a meal to hear the teaching. But these folks were so enraptured with what Jesus was saying, they stayed and got hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. Their hearts were filled, but their stomachs were empty. But sometimes adversity instructs us about ourselves and about God. And in this case, with 5,000 hungry people to be fed, and it would have taken 8 months of salary of a common working man to buy enough to feed them, that is adversity, because they don't know what they're going to do. God is going to teach them through Jesus something about themselves and about God. The Bible tells us Jesus already knew what he was going to do. Jesus already knew that he was going to feed them all. But he knew that they needed a lesson. And when God brings adversity into your life, troubles come, you can count on this. God has something in mind that he's going to teach you and show you. And that's why the Apostle Paul could say, I thank God even for the bad things. I thank God even for the adversities in my life. Because out of it all, good times, bad times, God can teach us something. And he has something to teach his disciples and something to teach you and I. And one of the things he's going to teach them is that God can use a little unnamed lad of a boy. You know, sometimes when parents won't stand up, when adults won't stand up, a child will. And it's Andrew. Oh, you gotta love Andrew. Andrew is the disciple that is always bringing someone to Jesus. It is Andrew who brought Simon Peter to Jesus to know salvation. It is Andrew who brings this little boy to Jesus to teach a beautiful lesson of God's provision. And later on, it is Andrew who brings some Greeks in the temple to Jesus right at the end of his ministry. Always bringing someone to Jesus. Would that we would all be Andrews. Suppose the little boy had said, no, not me. My lunch is for me. Mama packed it for me, and I'm not giving it up, and I'm hungry too, and I'm going to... Suppose he had said no. Suppose you say no. when God chooses you to do something for Him, to teach a beautiful lesson, to show a sign. But this lad freely, willfully, voluntarily gave it all up. A little lunch basket for Jesus. See, God can do great things with the little that I have and you have. You don't have to have a lot. You don't have to have a lot of intellect, a lot of wealth, or a lot of position, or a lot of power, or a lot of prestige in the community. You can be a little boy. Remember last week, right here? You remember that? When little Daly did our closing prayer? Best, shortest prayer we've ever had. He said, God, thank you for the church, amen. And we went home after we clapped. God can use a child. God can use you. He can use me. He can use the little that we have. He can use all of that to teach a great lesson. And then I want you to see this partnership is not only the little boy, but the disciples. Jesus thanks God, breaks the bread, gives it to his disciples, and they go through this crowd. That's what God does with you and with me. He lets us go out and feed the crowds. He lets us go out and nourish the crowd spiritually. He lets us go out and touch a life here and there and everywhere. He uses everybody. The disciples participated by sharing this food. The little boy shared, and all the disciples. And Jesus is just multiplied. How that happened, I do not know. How the molecules of bread and the molecules that make up the little fishes, how they multiplied, I don't know. There are those who, they say, oh, well, everybody had some food, but they were greedy and selfish, and when they saw the little boy give up his meal, they started giving up there. That's a cop-out. No. This is a sign. This is miraculous. This is God who could speak out of nothing and bring into being the universe. This is God who can create out of nothing something. This is God in the flesh. And He can create bread for you. He can create the fish for you. He can meet your needs no matter how hungry you might be, how little you might have. He will use what little bits we have to bless so many other people. I think of this church. Not a mighty great church. Our steeple does not rise near as high as some of the great cathedrals of the world. But this church, little people, common people, country people, everyday people, has blessed so many people throughout over 100, 150 years, more. He's blessing, He's using you to bless other people. Everyone who comes to this church is here because someone else in this church blessed them and helped them to come. May you be filled. He thanked God for the bread. Do you thank God for your bread, for your provisions? I had a person in my life, and I won't say who it was a long time ago, but I had a person in my life that when we were at a table, I wanted us to bow our heads and thank God for the table. And the man in that house said, no, I work and it's my salary that provided that food. You thank me. And then I read in Deuteronomy chapter 8, beware, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to get wealth. So you work, you get a salary, you work hard all week, but God gave you the health, He gave you the intellect, He gave you the opportunity, He gave you the job, He gives you the brain power. He has given you the ability to earn everything that you have. And so, when you are sitting at your table, or when you have anything in your life that is bought with your hard-earned money, remember God gave you the power to make that money and to be able to purchase that. And so Jesus first thanks God. And that it multiplies. It multiplies. Here's the wonderful thing about the provision of God. There is a superabundance far beyond what we expect or what we can even dream of. I've tested this. I'm stingy and I'm miserly, and sometimes I want to hang on to everything too. I admit that, but sometimes I just dig in and give all that I can, and I find out that not many days hence, God returns over and over the amount that I have been able to do. You cannot outgive God. You cannot outdo God. You cannot outbless God. You cannot outlove God. Whatever you give will come back oh so much. And when it was all over, Jesus said this, boys, go through the crowd again. Well, we've just been through it. We gave out all the food. Go through it again and take your lunch basket. Each one of you 12 disciples, go through and pick up what is left, that nothing ever shall be lost. Don't lose anything. What has God given you? Time. Jesus said in John chapter 9, and we'll be looking at that in a couple of weeks, one of the other signs. He said this to his disciples, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. Your night will come. My night is coming. I've only got today. I've only got now. God has blessed me. Now, how can I do something for him? I've only got now. I close with this thought. A man had a pocket watch. He pulled out his pocket watch and he looked at it, and it told him the time. He turned it over. On the back of that watch was inscribed these words, the night cometh. You've got today. You've got now. You can bless today. You can work now. You can give yourself now. You've only got now. The night cometh. So if you gathered up some leftovers and put in your little basket, keep giving it to other people. You've only